Alright, welcome back. In this lesson, we want to look at how to quickly create relationships in Microsoft Access. Now, keep in mind that because you have created a table and your tables contain your primary key and your foreign keys, that the relationship would have already been established. But in Access, you have to go a step further and ensure that the software recognizes that these are the relationship. And of course, it will still work as is because you're sharing the same data. But let's look at it so I don't confuse you further. So last time we looked at the generation of our three tables. We had customer table, we had room table, and we had our transaction table. And you may have noticed that the transaction table contained customer ID, which was the primary key from the other table, and room ID, which was the primary key from the other table of the same type. So I like to keep my work area clean, so I normally close off everything. But specifically for today, what we want to do is to look at how we create relationships. And so let's go to database tools and relationships. So database tools and relationships. Next, we want to add in our three tables. Now this can be done several ways. I can double click on it and it appears in the background, or I can select all three, which is easier for me. I select all three because I want all of them, and then add and then close. So I select my tables. So I have customer table, room table, transaction table. These can be moved around as you see fit. So I'm just going to drag it so it looks something like that. Now, to create your relationship to the table, notice my customer ID here is my primary key, but customer ID here is my foreign key. But say, for example, customer ID here is customer 1, name Marcel, last name Palma, right? And transaction ID went through. So instead of putting in the customer name, I'll say customer number 1, and then I could reference back and say, oh, number 1 was Marcel Palma, right? And so that is how I'll keep track of my customers. And also my room ID, I might have room number 1. The name is Tukan Room. It is on the left, it is a Queen Suite located on the left wing of the building, has in 2 beds. So to create a relationship, click on customer ID, left click on customer ID and hold on that button and drag it over to customer ID in the transaction table. It should say here customer ID, and we will click create, and this gives you the different types of relationship that you can establish. We're not touching on those yet. I'm just showing you the basics of Microsoft Access. You can also check enforce referential integrity, again, which means that, and I should leave you to research it, but it means that your data must exist in one table in order for you to put it into my table. So if I would enter customer 3 into transaction table and customer 3 does not exist in my customer table, then the database should tell me something and say, hey, customer 3 is not there, so you're entering something that is wrong, right? Anyway, let's click on create, and that links our table together or creates our relationship. What other relationship do you think we need to create? And again, to find this out, you look for keys that are similar in name, right? Room ID, you're right. So we click on room ID from room table, and we drag it over to room ID in your transaction table, and then click on create. And so we would have created both our relationships to all 3 tables. So now we have all 3 tables related to each other. So I can see customer ID. Let's as an example, I walk in as a customer, all my information is in. I'm customer number 1. The rooms, there are rooms 1 through 10. I'm renting room number 4, right? So my transaction ID is whatever number there is. I'm customer number 1. I rented room number 4. The price is $50, and I rented it today. So whenever I go through this, I can say, all right, show me a list of all rooms. So show me a list of all people who rented room number 4. And so my database could search for room ID here, and return the customer ID of who rented room number 4. Right? And also I can get all the amenities of room number 4, and I can also get all the customer information of who rented room number 4 at that particular time. So that's the power of database, right? But for this particular lesson, we only want to talk about how we create relationships. In our next lesson, we look at how we create forms to enter data.